Mm,
This is Dre Baldwin, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
that's right. This is what we do. We talk to people. And so Dre reached out to me, and this is what I love about the show, man. When you build something, and you've built something, you built several somethings. When you have something that is bigger than you, it's amazing what it finds for you. You know, it finds me Dre, and Dre finds Pete, Pete finds Dre, and all of a sudden, we know each other, and we get to talk and all these things, and have share space, share time. And I love that about this world that we are able to build and work within. Now I know that you have been busy because look, you look at your resume, man, and you get busy. But tell me about when you write all these books, when you make all these TED Talks, when you make all these videos, you must have stuff land on your doorstep all the time where you're like, I can't believe that just happened.
Well, so what's the question?
Well, tell me about something like that that shows up, like these unknowable gifts that show up because you stay busy, because you stay connected, because
Mhm.
other things. I didn't I didn't I didn't look for you, right? You showed up on my
Right.
doorstep, right? What's your version of that, where it's like, hey, this wonderful thing just arrived in my life because of the work that I've done, because of the seeds I've planted, because I'm out there. Now I'm speaking in your voice because I'm out there working these other
Mhm.
things, and I don't have to even worry about it. I know these seeds are planted, and I'll come back and be like, oh yeah, no shit. Of course, a Dre
Right.
pops into Pete's life because Pete's been working hard.
Right. So for me, man, there's been many of them. I'll tell you, one of the first ones that happened was back in the basketball days. My background as an athlete was my freshman year of college. I went to a school called Penn State Abington, which is right outside of Philly. And at the time, this school wasn't even Division III yet. So this Division III is like the third tier of college sports for those who don't follow sports. And Abington was like a provisional D3, so you can only play 2 years of sports. So after my freshman year, I had played there after walking on, and I'm thinking I'm urgent about I got to figure out what am I going to do next because I only got one more year, and then I can't play sports anymore. My career's done. And that summer, because this is right outside of Philly, and I'm from Philly, so it was about 20 minutes away from the home that I grew up in. Abington does not have dorms. There's no camp. There's no housing. So you
Yeah.
live at home and you travel to school. So I would go to the gym every day on campus in the summer. So I would just go up there and work on my game. And I had a job at CVS, the convenience store, that summer. So I would wake up in the morning, drive to the campus, work on my game in an empty gym. Nobody else was in the gym. The whole campus was dead silent. And none of my teammates from the basketball team that year, I never saw those guys again after the season ended because at a school like that, the players they play because they can. They're not ambitious. These guys are not, they don't have hoop dreams. Like they're not trying to make the NBA. They're just playing because they can. So I never saw these guys ever again after the season ended. I would be up at the gym by myself working on my game all the time, every day. Empty gym. One day I didn't eat breakfast. So I go across the campus to the cafeteria because Abington's campus has four buildings. So it's two classroom buildings, there's the cafeteria, and there's the gym. All right, so I went to one of the other four buildings on campus. I go in to get something to eat. Guy approaches me as I'm walking out, and he says, "Hey, man, what position do you play?" Now I know I don't know this guy because the campus is so small. You know everybody, right? And this
Yeah.
guy's a black guy, so I know all the black people. So I know I don't know this guy. All right, so he's like, "What position do you play?" And I'm like, "Well, how you know I even play? What are you talking about?" Because mind you, we're in the cafeteria, not the gym. And he's like, "Well, I'm just asking." And started talking to him. I tell him what position I play. He pulls out a business card, hands it to me. He works at a different Penn State campus. Now he works in the admissions office, so he clearly he was there, like maybe doing some admissions, recruiting stuff like that for students. Now he had two jobs though. His other job was he was the basketball coach at Penn State Altoona, which at the time was a full-fledged 4-year sports Division III college, which was a step up from the school that I was at the time. He ends up recruiting me in the middle of that conversation. I go home, tell my parents, "Hey, I met a coach at the school." And they're like, "That's cool," because Abington and Altoona are in the same system. They're in the Penn State system. So the transfer was very smooth. All you had to do was go to the office, the bursar's office, tell them, "Hey, I want to move to a different campus in the system." They click a couple buttons, it's done. So it's not like this big process when you're going from different schools. And that's how I got recruited to go to Penn State Altoona. And all of my best friends to this very day my people that I met there. The reason I ended up a pro athlete is because of that there. And that all happened simply because I took the initiative of going to that gym every day and working on my game when nobody told me to do it. I never saw the coach again after the season ended. I never saw my teammates again. And that gym is a beautiful gym, one of my favorite gyms to this day. Nobody was ever in there. It was dead, quiet, empty, except for me. And because I took that initiative, Pete, that's the reason why that opportunity happened. So there's one for you.
It's funny. So I played a lot of ball growing up, and I wasn't much of an organized basketball player, but I played a lot of pickup balls. I played a lot of guys who went on to the next level, and
Right.
and look, here's what I did. I had a big motor. I passed the ball, and I played defense real hard, so I could blend in with anybody. I got dunked on. This is a 100% true story. I got dunked on by Brent Berry one time, and look again. I was pretty good, right? I couldn't shoot very well, ambidextrous, and I couldn't get one hand to leave the other hand out of the way. And so I'm backpedaling. Brent Berry's got the ball. I know it's Brent Berry, and he's playing way above my level, but I'm like, I'm gonna D up Brent Berry. And he goes to shoot like a mid-range jumper, like at the free throw line, And I'm like, I got him. He went up before me, so I go to jump, and I go up into the air as high as I can, and then I start coming down. I realize he's not shooting the jumper; he's gonna dunk. And as I'm coming down, his foot flies by my face. He's wearing topsiders, by the way, and then he dunks the ball. And I thought, oh, okay, so there is a limit to where my game is and where his game is. That wasn't the story I wanted to tell you. What I wanted to tell you was I was playing pickup basketball with the guy that I grew up with, and he went on to play basketball, around your level, maybe a level above, but somewhere not that wasn't Division One. He was a super great basketball player. And the thing was, is I was a dog. I'd get after guys. I didn't care. And so, like, if there was a breakaway and he was going to go and dunk, I knew he would. I would just run. I didn't care if I was 20 feet behind him. I would come after him.
Mhm.
And I saw him, I don't know, maybe 10 years later, we were out playing some basketball. And he's like, hey, Pete, I got to tell you something. He's like, you taught me something playing basketball. And I taught you something? And he's like, yeah, man, because I knew if I had a breakaway, there might be someone like you coming behind me, to never underestimate what a breakaway was. Because sometimes I'd get back there and I'd be, and he knew like I could D him because he knew I was back there. And so I was applying pressure. Now, look, not going to work 99 times out of 100. But that one time when he knew I was back there, I might be in his head enough that he might be worried that I might be close. And there were times when I would get there and I would mess with his shot, right?
Right.
Because he knew I was a dog. He knew I had a big motor. And when I was on his team, he'd watch me do it to other guys, especially like if they thought because I was a white dude that I could shoot. So I would just run on the perimeter back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I would just try to wear dudes out, right? And so I taught him by just getting after people. And, you don't know the lessons you taught guys. And he thanked me. He's like, that changed how I played the game. I was arrogant. And then you taught me that there's always someone who's out there who just doesn't care about being embarrassed by being dunked on because he's waiting for that one time, right? And I know that resonates with you.
Right. So the players like you, I liked playing against guys like you because when you play at that level, like at the Division III level, or you're playing pickup in places and people know that you're good, oftentimes people don't really want to compete because they know that they can't beat you on talent and skill. But I like playing against the guys who I knew I could probably beat them, but I knew I had to actually show up to beat you. Like you were a guy who I would have to show up to beat. I couldn't sleepwalk and beat you. I was going to have to actually play. Yeah, and I like that. I like competing against people who think they can win, or at least they're going to try. Like, I don't like competing against people who are not going to try because they think, well, you're too good. I can't win. I don't even want to play. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, I want to compete against somebody who's going to compete. So, yes, I appreciate that.
And there are so many times when you see someone who was really good, but they'd have a tell, and I'm just looking for it, right? Like there was a guy who, if he was going to pull up, he would do like a double cross low. I'm like, oh, he's going to pull up. And so I would scooch in close. And I'd just already be in his way. And that would prevent him from even shooting. So he would like, oh, I got D'd. And he'd back out. Right. And so it wasn't even that I D'd up the shot. It was I just prevented his rhythm, because we weren't super great players, but there's all those little things in life that are like that where you realize, oh, my presence here, or, oh, I see a pattern, and you can interrupt the pattern or you can accentuate the pattern. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And what it should have done to that guy, who knows who that guy was, is he should have learned, okay, I'm giving this away, and this guy's somehow taking away my ability to shoot. I'm assuming he's a pretty good shooter. That's why you ran up on him. So he should have developed some other abilities, a counter to your counter. So that if somebody did that, then he could go around them. And then you had to back off and he can shoot again. So hopefully he adjusted his game. Who knows?
Well, and I would tell you, like, hey, man, I know every time you're going to pull up because you go low twice, like that. And so you have to find a different pattern. And guys who are great, you don't even got to tell them, right? But there is that thing, that pattern, that thing. That's cool. So were you born with this drive to just continue like to outwork, to out hustle, to outperform, to outproduce, or did you have to build that?
I would say it's a little bit of both, but I would give more credit to building it than I was born with it, because I didn't even start playing basketball until I was like 14. So I don't know what I was doing the first 14 years of my life, but it wasn't basketball. So the drive I found once I found the right vehicle. And that's something that I tell people in my audience often, is that yes, determination and hard work and grit and all of that, but you got to apply it to the right thing, because had
Yeah.
I taken all this and applied it to baseball, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So you got to find the right vehicle to apply everything to. So I would say I would give it about 80% to I developed it.
Okay, so but like legitimately, if you're playing sub Division three basketball, what
Mhm.
made you think that basketball was it? Like, why wasn't it baseball? Why wasn't it, I don't know, track? Why wasn't it mathletes? Why wasn't it
Yeah.
something else? Why was it basketball? Because you can't rightfully tell me that, like, oh, it was basketball when, look, in Philly, were you the 100th best basketball player in the high school system during that time? And I'm not knocking your
Not
game.
according
I'm
to the
saying,
rankings, no. According to the rankings, no.
yeah. So what made you think that basketball was it, right? Like, there's all
Yeah.
kinds of guys who are playing at a level that you like. There's some dogged determinism there, right? Like, you're like, I know I'm good. I know I'm doing this.
Mhm.
Where talk about the essence of that. Like, where was that born in? Why did you stick with it?
A couple things. So
Yeah.
number one, I I played a little bit of every sport. No kickball, no two-hand touch football. And then the first team sport I ever went out for was football, but my family couldn't afford football equipment. So I never really played football. I never put on the
Hmm.
pads and the helmet. Then it was baseball for several years. My father's always been a youth baseball coach. Actually, he still coaches youth baseball now. He's in his 60s, still coaches youth baseball. And I played that for several years. I wasn't really good. My ceiling was mediocrity. So I
Yeah.
tried it, but I wasn't gonna get any better. I probably would have sat the bench on a high school team. That would have been my ceiling. So then I went to basketball around age 14. Good thing about basketball, Pete, you notice, is that you can practice and get better by yourself. You don't need other people. All you need is a ball on the court. Whereas baseball, you need people mostly and equipment. Football, you need equipment and you need people. Basketball, you need anything. And
Yeah.
neighborhood I came from, everybody played basketball, right? And every other sport, well, not every other sport, but many other sports, you got to have another person or some kind of equipment. Whereas basketball, you need absolutely nothing. Just come as you are, and one ball, 50 people, you got a game. So that's how I gravitated towards basketball. And it is a little bit of luck, because, hey, what if I didn't have that much talent for basketball? What if my natural
Mm.
sport actually was tennis, but I never played tennis? Then it would have just been a lost opportunity, wasted talent. So basketball, I just happened to, I happen to have the ability for it. I had the physicality. I'm 6'4". I got long arms. I can jump. I can run. It made perfect sense. And then I could practice it on my own. So that's how I was able to develop the skill and get better. And then when it came to answering the rest of your question here, why I keep going and why I keep trying, because there were a lot of players, a lot of very good players in Philadelphia, at least during my high school years. You had these players who were stars since they were 14. Like, there were kids in my neighborhood who I thought they were 19 or 20 years old, and I found out they were the same age as me. They were just that much better. Like, and some kids are just precocious, right? And sometimes you'll see a 14-year-old kid, he has the body of a grown man when he's 14. I had the body of a 14-year-old when I was 14, right? So that's another thing that goes into it. And for me, a couple other things going further here is that I, number one, was foolish enough to think that it could work out. I had to be dumb enough to think, if I keep trying, something's going to happen. That's one. Next thing was, I always was looking at the long game, and I could not have articulated this when I was 16, but I can articulate it now. I was always looking at the long game, that I could see that I was a late bloomer because I started playing late. So if I was going to bloom, it was going to happen later than most people would bloom, because most players start playing when they're 5 years old. So they bloom when they're 10, 12, and they'll get really good in high school, and maybe they go on to college. I didn't start playing until I was 14. So my blooming didn't happen until after I was out of high school. Like, I really got to the point that I really felt confident in my game, Pete, that summer before I started college. And at that point, if you haven't shown anything, nobody's checking for you. It's pretty much over, right? If you haven't shown anything by the time you graduate high school. But that's when I really started to feel like I was good. So when I got to college and those guys saw me, they didn't know me from anywhere. They didn't know me, my background or anything. So they saw me in college, and my talent was really starting to develop at that time. They're like, all right, well, there must be something wrong with this guy, because he's clearly this good, but he didn't do anything in high school. But it's like they didn't understand I
Yeah.
just got good. I just got good the last summer. All right. You're just seeing it now. It's just perfect timing. So that was the funny thing about some of the people who came across me in college. They thought, well, this guy's he's been wasting his talent his whole life. That's why he's here. No, I just got this talent. So that was another thing. I could see myself slowly getting better. And
Yeah.
many of my peers, the guys who have been good since they were 14, 15, they got to about 18. They stopped getting better. All right, they stopped growing. All right, he didn't get any taller. He still got that same body at 19 that he had when he was 14, and he didn't get any better. So now they're kind of starting to plateau because now everybody else is catching up to them and they're not elevating anymore. So I slowly started to pass them. So those years between about 18 and 21, that's when I passed a lot of people who had previously been a lot better than me. And the field starts to thin out. The young men where I come from, by the time they're about 16, 17, they aren't showing any promise in something, they pretty much stop. They stop trying.
Mm.
And the ones who did show promise, the select few, they keep going. And I kept going. I was one of the dummies who didn't know I was supposed to quit. So I kept going. And that's how I start to slowly catch up to them. And then the last piece here, Pete, is that I just always had that discipline. And I had to credit my parents for that because my parents are not athletes. They did not play sports. They are not even 6 feet tall. Neither of my parents. They're both about 5'7", 5'8". I'm 6'4". But they did go to work every day. They got up and went to work every day. And there were times where neither of my parents had a vehicle. They would take public transportation to work. And my dad, I know for a fact, worked far from where we lived. And he took multiple modes of transportation to work and from work every single day. And again, not an athlete, but I saw my parents do that. And I even told them when I became an adult that the example that you set, I applied that to sports, even though y'all didn't play sports. So I have to credit them because nobody else told me to do that. So I have to say that, as a parent, you know what they say, your kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. So even though they were not athletes, the only way I could have gotten that, the only place I could have got it from was watching my parents. So I had to give them credit for that.
We had a rapper on the show named Honore Vachon. His rapper name is X-Rated. He's about my age. He's like 50 years old now. Very successful. He when he was, and that's funny. We had these overlapping lives, just not quite overlapping, but we both were in Sacramento around the same time. And he's a young black kid, but it was a dangerous area, a lot of gangs and everything. And you had to, in his world, he had to get ganged up. And it was like funny. I worked at a place called Tower Records, and he just lived and went to the school there. And he came to Tower on his birthday, and he looked at a guy driving a car for too long, and that was like the beginning. As a middle schooler, right? This guy drives across the center median to come to hassle him and his cousin. And these kids are kids. They're riding on a bike, and Honore is on his cousin's handlebars. They're going to go, buy some pop and buy a CD for his birthday. Like, these are little kids. And he's like, "What are you looking at? Don't you look at me." And that starts the whole journey. And going to the mall was like a military operation. And I know because I've got on a lot of combat patrols. Anyhow, he talked about, like, to exit that life, you needed like these three elements, and each had to be extraordinary. Like, you had to have an extraordinary event. You yourself had to have, like, to believe that you were extraordinary, and then you had to have an extraordinary mentor, so that, like, everybody kept telling him he was extraordinary. He had this extraordinary talent. He could rap, and everybody thinks they're a rapper, right? Like, everybody does, but they're like, no, you really have talent. But he couldn't put all three pieces together. Ultimately, him and his friends go to some lady's house and they murder this lady, right? So he goes to jail for 25 years. He's like, I didn't kill this lady, but I was there to do harm, and we didn't mean for her to die, but we did mean for her kid to get harmed and probably die, and so I deserve to go to jail, right? So he does all this. He has this whole rapping career while he's in prison, but he talks about this trifecta of extraordinary things. He's like, it's really hard once a kid gets ensnared in this thing. And we're talking about Sacramento, right? Like, we don't think of Sacramento as being this place that ensnares kids into this, at 12 and 13 years old, right? Like, you don't think about that, but that weight starts to pull on you. That dehumanization starts to happen. And that kid who's like, I don't know, this is where I'm from. This is what we do, right? And we have this limiting factor that's sort of built into our society, where some kids, whether they're black or poor or whatever it is, they get bound up in this thing, and it is hard to match that extraordinary thing. It sounds like you had an extraordinary example in your parents, and it sounds like you had extraordinary determination. And sometimes you have a coach who makes a difference. And I'm going to add one more element to this piece. like John Mosley from out here in Southern California. We have East LA Community College and their basketball team, very notable. He's been on the show, and he tells these kids that are having their last chance, right, and trying to get to the next game, maybe go to the NBA, maybe go to Europe and do these things. And he's like, man, if you guys believed in yourself the way that we do, I'm not being mean to you. I believe in you more than you believe in you. I'm showing you the path and what it takes to get there, right? These are talented dudes. These are the dudes we're talking about. Like, you are 6'7", you are incredible. And maybe you don't go to the NBA, but you can go to Long Beach State. You can go to USC. You can go to these other places. But man, don't complain because I tell you to run. I'm telling you to run because this is how it works, And so you have all these things that young dudes, like, we're just so bound up in our energy and our beliefs that are so out of whack sometimes. I wonder if you could talk to that and about how you defeat that, because it is so self-fulfilling at times.
I think the biggest thing is the influences. So just like you just said with the coach.
Yeah.
So some young men in sports, for example, is having that right coach come along and take you under their wing. So there are a lot of players who made it to the NBA who will tell you that story, that there was some coach, Allen Iverson, and John Thompson came and got him. He was locked up, right? Steve Francis, he was a guy who was in the streets and lost his family, didn't really have anybody around him. And even people who don't play sports. So think of somebody like 50 Cent, he didn't have his family around. His grandmother took him in. And there are all types of stories like that of some person who's kind of lost. Nobody's really helping them out, and somebody comes and takes them under their wing. Jimmy Butler down here in Miami, his family had abandoned him, or they kicked him out, and he had a family take him in, and he became a star after that. And there are a bunch who don't have anybody take them in, and they end up somewhere else, right? They end up in a box, for whatever reason, and they don't get out. So sometimes it's about having that influence. Luckily, I had my natural influences in my parents. And hopefully we get more of that. But then there are people who don't have that. So they have to, I guess we got to call it luck. And they got lucky, because if they didn't get that lucky break, then that talent we would never know about, and it goes to what I tell my audience: the most valuable real estate in the world is a graveyard, because people take that talent with them and it never gets used. Nobody ever finds out about it. And there's plenty of it that we don't know about simply because they didn't get that break and they didn't have that influence around them. So that's one thing, is the influence. The good thing about the world that we're in today is that there are plenty of people who can get influenced by somebody who they never met physically, because we have the internet, right? So we have shows like this one right here. We have YouTubers, you got Instagrammers, you got blogs, you got all these things where someone who's lost and they have no guidance, even if they can't get out of their physical environment, they can go on the internet and they can connect to somebody who they will never meet. But that person could help start turning their mind around, because you could just consume all of their episodes. You can watch all their videos, read all their stuff, follow them on social media, and you can start to have that person be a mentor to you virtually without ever physically meeting them, without ever knowing them. And you might not even have to buy anything from them. Just the free stuff that they put out can be enough to turn you around. So that's the good thing about the internet, at least.
Yeah, and I'm putting your link up for your website. That's just an entry portal. You're on all the big social media sites, and so everything can be done there. You put up video on YouTube all the time, Instagram. Everybody should go check it out. I'll continue to put links up, but that's a good entry point. There's a lot of things there, and it's great. One of the things that I loved about, look, it's easy to say no to someone who cold pitches me on the show, right? Like, the last thing I need are more guests. I got a shitload of guests, but you took the time. You get this, right? Like, you get stuff thrown at you, and you're like, yeah, no thanks, I don't need any more work. But what you did is you took the time. You're like, John and Pete, here's the thing, and you did your own little private video for us, right? And taking the time to do that. What I don't need is for people to use my show to give me more work to do, right? I don't need that. But you took time to ask in a way that, like, it's got to take time to do video. And then I looked around at your stuff and I'm like, yeah, this isn't phony. Like, Dre really cares about people. He's really working on trying to, get out there and change, at least change the world that you can touch. And I can appreciate that. And I'm glad to be a part of it. So anybody, like, this has my full endorsement. You're doing great things. How do you map out what your future is? Again, like, you're writing books, you're doing videos, you're doing all of these things. it's easy to just be doing things to be doing things when your like default is to do things. But how do you map out? How do you know, like, how do you stay ahead of yourself? So you're like, this is the direction I need to go right now.
Great question. So the answer is really just deconstructing and really thinking about where do you want to be, let's say 10 years from now. What do you want your business
Mm-hmm.
to look like, or what do you want your life to look like? And then from that point, and this is one of the things that I specialize in personally, is just deconstructing what would need to be in place and what needs to happen in order for us to make the connection from point Z, where you want to be, let's say 10 years from now, and point A, where we are right now. And what pieces need to be in place, what steps need to happen, and who needs to be here, who needs to be involved, what needs to change, what needs to be done, and what needs to change about. Now, I talk about goal congruence, the congruence between the goals and your activities and the way that you live. And it's four specific areas. It's how you need to think, who you need to be, what you need to do, including temporary sacrifices, and what other people need to do as well, and then what you cannot do, either permanently or temporarily. So when you put those four pieces together, when you ask yourself about those four questions, that pretty much maps out the whole thing. Now, it may not be that simple because it's not a quick one-word answer to those four. Like, the answer to one of those might be 10 pages, right? It might be a lot of things you got to write out. But the time that you take to map that out, which many people call strategizing, the time you take to map that out, you don't have to do it over and over again. You probably will need to edit your strategy, because best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Things aren't going to go perfect just because you planned it out. But
Yeah.
when you take the time to strategize, that planning time is priceless, even though the plans are generally worthless. As I like to tell people, plans are worthless, but planning is priceless, because the plans that you make are never going to go exactly as you thought they would go. But the time that you spend planning engages the most powerful tool known to man, which is the human brain. You are actually
Yeah.
thinking about what you're going to do. And one challenge that the internet provides is that it causes people to stop thinking. And people think that they're thinking because you're watching a YouTube video, or, hey, even listening to a podcast. But listening to me talk is not you thinking. All right, that's me thinking and telling you what I think. But you got
Yeah.
to take time. Everybody who's listening to this right now, you got to take time to think for yourself. I mean, the book is
Yeah.
called Think and Grow Rich, right? Not listen and grow rich, not watch and grow rich. Think and grow rich. So you got to take the time to actually think. So that's one challenge of the internet, is that, people pick their phones up 150 times a day, and you could be spending that time thinking, right? And a lot of people don't take that time, and that's where that planning doesn't happen, because people get into this mindset of, well, no, I can just get all the information online. I can get it all from YouTube. That's all I have to do. LOL. No, that's not all you have to do. You got to do something else, because if all it took was watching and consuming free material on the internet, then everybody will be successful. And we're all consuming. All right. So it got to
Yeah.
be more than that.
Yeah. Boy, you just said a lot there. Let's take that, and because one of the things we have trouble with is determining what's tactical, what's strategic, what's operational,
Hmm.
and putting them in their little house, right? Because you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you can't operationalize it and then turn it into tactical steps,
Right.
and like today I went swimming, man, and that's good for my body, right? And if I can swim 200 days out of the year, or replace those 200 days with some other activity that's comparable to swimming, I'm going to feel great. My body's going to be great. I'm going to maintain muscle mass. But if I can't swim, well, that strategy of working out 200 days out of the year, so what? It doesn't matter, right? Like, and so how do you operationalize, and how do you build the tactical muscle to go out and do the things that you can do? And so, like later on this year, I played a lot of ball, right? I got to get my ankle rebuilt, and that's going to change, my ability to do what I want to do physically. So, how do we check ourselves? How do we validate that our strategy? It can be great and thought out, but if you don't if you don't have the tactical steps that fulfill what that strategy requires, so much for that strategy.
Are you getting surgery?
Yeah, they're gonna go in post and snap some rubber bands and probably jam some extra cartilage in there. Man, I wrecked my ankle bad. This was in war, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
but
Was it?
you know how it is when you play ball though, man. You get used to wrecking your ankle, and just after a lot of time with wrecking my ankles, it just needs to be
Yeah.
tightened up.
Was it a progressive injury over time, or was it one specific thing that happened?
It was one specific thing weight on my back, about 100 pounds, and I was getting off a bus, and the stair in the back of the bus where like the bathroom door is, they cut out that step, and I put my foot there, and it went down a whole extra step, and so my leg collapsed on my ankle.
Oh,
Yeah, it was bad, and so that they're just like, you just got to get it rebuilt. So it's just one of those things, man.
yeah, yeah. And with athletes, it's different parts of the body. Different people have different parts of the body that continually give them trouble. So me, ankles I never really had many ankle issues. It would be like my knee would bother me playing ball. Sometimes I would have knee issues because I was a jumper. I was above the rim guy. So my knee would bother me sometimes. That was usually the issue I would have most in basketball was the knee. And sometimes
how about your toes? Your big toe? Did that hurt at all?
No, I never really had toe issues.
Yeah, that's like for the super big guys, right? They have all that weight on there,
Yeah, the feet happens to the big guy. Really big guys usually feet, but smaller guys like under 6'9" usually don't have foot issues. But for me, it was the knees, and now I don't play ball anymore. I like to run outside. I get hamstring. My hamstring bothers me whenever I run like my best speeds. I always get my hamstrings get tight. So
you totally retired from basketball? No more basketball at all?
Oh, cold turkey. The day I played my last game was a 3-on-3 tournament. It was a $10,000 prize. We won. We won the championship game 11-0. And I said, this is my last game. I have not played a single officiated basketball game since that was 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I played golf. I worked for a golf magazine, and I walked off in the middle of the 7th hole, and I'm like, I'm never playing this game again. I wasn't mad at golf. I was just done. I was like, you know what? I don't ever have to play this game again. I have filled up to the top with golf.
Yeah, golf will be my next sport. I do a little. I do boxing training now, and I run. So when I'm too old for doing that, then I'm gonna get to the golf course. That'll be my next sport.
All right, fair enough. So let's talk about that tactics, though. So how do you like build the small steps to fulfill the strategic goal? Like, how do you do that? And then what if you find out you're like, you know what? I hate going to the driving range. I can't stand that shit. I don't want to do it. And so you realize golf is not going to be my thing. Like, how do you do that? Hold yourself accountable and get to the subset so that you realize I don't want to go to the gym and shoot free throws. I just don't want to do it. Or like when I go to the pool, there's a little bubble around the pool, right? Like a virtual bubble. And I'm like, I just have to jump through this bubble and then I'll be in the pool and then I'll be fine. But there's that bubble there. And so once I jump through it, I know I'm good, but I've got to bust through it. Right. So there's those things. So how do you recommend doing that? How do you develop those habits when they're developable so that you can feed the strategic demand for the repetition?
Good question. So the way that I would have people do it today is crowdsource and borrow the brain of another person. It's simple as that. Just borrow somebody else's brain. So if you decide that you want to get into a certain field, let's say somebody is thinking about getting into a certain business, or you want to play a certain sport, or a certain company you want to work for, go find someone who's already in that space and sit down and talk with them, or see if you can shadow them for a day. I mean, this is the reason why they have internships in college, right? Ostensibly is the reason why they have it, is so that you can see what it's like to be in this world and decide if you really want to do this. Or you want to be a basketball player? Okay. Come with me to the gym twice a day and this workout that I got to do and this recovery that I got to do, and see what it's like to actually be this person and decide, do you really want to do this? Because this is the part that's not on TV. This is the part that's not on the internet. Do you really want to do this? Because this is the game that you would actually be getting in. Remember the first job that I got out of college, first job I got hired for, I didn't really keep the job, but I got hired for, was a salesperson. And it was an outside sales job. And you know what I was selling, Pete? Selling landline phone service to businesses. Landline phone. I don't think people even have those anymore. Some companies still got them, but landline phone service. So I had to shadow. So I went to the interview, and they would have took anybody, because it's hard to keep somebody at that job. Right. And there was this guy named Matt. He was a former athlete. So they connected me with him because he was an athlete. He said, all right, come on Monday. You're going to shadow me for the day. And so you can see what we do. And then you can decide after shadowing me. I was supposed to shadow him for like a week. Shadow me for a week. And at the end of the week, if you still want to work here, we'll see. Because I think they pretty much knew that after a week of that, people just stopped showing up. Right. So I shadowed this guy. For a day, and he has a map. This is before we had maps on the phone. He had a map. He's pulling a map out where we got to drive to today. He's driving all out and he's stopping at businesses, just checking in with the guys. Hey, you take a look at what I showed you? The guy said, I'm thinking about it. He goes to another place and we're going back and forth. We got in and out of the car like 50 times in one day. And he's going to different places. And this is what he's doing. He's driving around and he's stressing to me the whole time he's driving how great of an opportunity this is that I would be passing up if I didn't take the job. I think he was on, I think I would have been like his underline. I think that's the way they had it. Because the way he was selling it was like he was getting something out of this. So anyway, I lasted one day. I did not show up the next day. I was supposed to be there. He called me. I didn't answer. He didn't try to call again. That was it. But the whole point is they had you shadow so you can see. All right, are you sure you want to do this? Because they were right to do that because it helps filter people out. That's exactly what they needed to do. And that's what people can do these days is go shadow somebody who's already living that life. And you can see if you really want to do this job because it might not be all the glitz and glamour that it appears to be from the outside. And it's not just I know you see the salary, you see the dollar amount, you want the money, but are you willing to do all these things to get the money? So that's the thing that I would have people do. And money, again, can be metaphorical here. So when it comes to the tactical and the strategic is when you borrow somebody else's brain, they already know all the pieces that you need. Okay, so you want to do that? Okay, here are the things you need to do. You need to do this, this. And again, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that people probably never would have considered. Are you sure that you still want to do this? Now that I tell you all the things you have to do. I give you an example. You ever watch the TV show The Wire?
Yeah, I've watched that before, yeah.
Okay, so did you watch all of it? Like
no, not at all.
Okay, so there was one scene in there where this guy he had been locked up. He got out of the prison. He didn't want to be in the streets anymore because he had been a street guy. He wanted to be a boxer because he knew how to fight. So he wanted to teach boxing. So he got access to this empty warehouse and he was going to get it, up to code so he can put a boxing gym in there for the kids in the neighborhood. And someone tells him, like he was connected to some church guy, and church guy says, well, to have a boxing gym, you got to get permits and you got to get licenses from the city. You can't just open a boxing gym. So he's like, all right. So he goes downtown to get the permits. And he says, he goes to a front desk of some office and says, I want to get a permit for a boxing gym. And the woman says, all right, well, these are papers you got to fill out. And she just starts filling him up with papers. He has a whole stack of papers. You got to get this. And he's just looking there startled. Like, I got to do all this just to open a boxing gym. He's like, I don't know if I want to do this. So he's not sure what to do. He goes back to the church guy. Church guy says, oh, well, you got to know the right people. So church guy takes him downtown to a city councilman because the city councilman wants to be connected to the church because the church guy gets him votes. So he says, hey, and he says, yeah, I went down to the office to open a gym. And the councilman says, how'd it go? And the street guy says, oh, not the way I thought it would go. And they all started laughing. And the church guy and the councilman laugh because they know what it is. He's like, oh, well, did you use my name? The city councilman says this. And he says, what you mean? And city councilman signs his name to a business card, hands it to the street guy, says, go back to the office, give him this, see how it goes now. And the next scene, he's got an open boxing gym. And the whole point is sometimes you just got to connect to the right person who already knows what to do. They already know the game. They already know the steps that you have to take. Or, hey, if you got to do it the long way, you got to find out what the long way is. Do you really want to do this? So sometimes there's a shortcut in there. And the shortcut is usually connecting to someone who's already been there, done that, not trying to do it all by yourself.
Yeah, man, you just said a mouthful. And we could say another mouthful of different stuff. And it would be all part of that. Using basketball again, you can show someone like a clip of Kobe talking about getting up at 3 a.m. and going to the gym for this first workout and doing 5 workouts in the day. You can't do that from day one. You can't. You'll break your body. Like you don't even know what you're working out for, right? Like you have to build up to that. It's like looking at the gym at the most fit person in the gym and be like, I'm going to be that person. Well, you got to get to where you can get to being the person who might become that person. And by the way, your body may not be built for that because Shaq couldn't do that. Shaq's like, no, man, I'm too big for that kind of work. Like I can't be doing that. You need me to be what I have a different job, Mm-hmm. And so you've got to figure these things out. And I'll bring it back to like what we do, right? Like we produce things, like so someone will hire me and they'll say, hey, Pete, help us have a show. And I'm like, I'm gonna help you have a show. First thing you got to do is got to give me some money up front because I know how to build a show. And if you leave it up to me, we'll have a show. The problem is not going to be me. We can look around. We can go, Pete knows how to produce a show. Can we agree on that? Yes, we can. Okay, good. So the problem is going to be y'all. And so here's the thing. If you guys just follow these steps, we'll have a show, But it's not easy. You're going to have to take time to do things. You're going to have to pay money. You're going to have to, develop capacity or pay for capacity. And when they hear all the steps, they're like, God damn. And I'm like, or you can pay for that. And they're like, okay, this is getting harder than we thought, and or more expensive than they thought. And I'm like, that's why you have to understand. This is why most podcasts fail. This is why most video shows fail, because it turns out it's a cost center. It's a business in and of itself to do all of these things. So yeah, I'm glad to help you. Here's the first things you can do without paying me a thing. Go grab 6 of your friends and go interview them and come back to me in a month and tell me how that went. And guess what happens, Dre? They don't come back. We got to ever do it, right? Because it's too hard for them. And I'm like, if you come back and you still want to do it, and you're like, I get it. There's a lot of work here. Let me pay you some money to help me. Then we'll do it. But that first step, those first hurdles, because I know the steps, right? It's too much for most people because it's just really, really hard to produce 10, let alone, come on, 1,000. Like, come on. That so, and I use the example when I'm talking about podcasting specifically, and there's for sure a basketball example, but I'll say, like, how many people can swim across the pool 25 yards and just have it be like easy, like you're not even tired. And like nobody can, because that's just not a common thing. Now imagine doing butterfly for 1,000 yards. That's what we're talking about. Now I can show you how to do it. I can talk to you about it, but you got to get in the pool and you got to get to doing it at some point. And it's the same thing with basketball. It's like, playing full court 5-on-5 for 2 hours straight. I can tell you about that, but being able to play, compete, and actually contribute, that's going to take you forever to get built up for that.
Right. You got to get in game shape.
Yeah. So it's great to talk about that hive mind and finding people who can tell you what to do, because I'll point out the dragons. There's a dragon. That dragon you can kill with money. That dragon you're going to have to kill with your bare hands. And if you can't kill that dragon first, and it's a little small dragon, then don't fuck with the other dragons, because it's not your game.
Right.
Yeah. Man, I don't want to drive the whole conversation. I know you've got certain things you'd want to talk about. So let me hit the ball back over to you. What are you into, man? Like, what's valuable to you? What do you want folks to know about?
Man, what do I want folks to know about? I can tell them about a lot of things. Tell me who your ideal person, who's the ideal person listening to this?
He's a person like me. She's a person like me. She's interested in a lot of things. People talk about niching down. I'm out about that, because life's not a niche. Sometimes life's a niche, but most lives are compelling. They're fascinating. Like, hey, I'm into Star Wars. I had enough Star Wars. Let me get on to baking. I'm into baking right now. Oh, well, you know what? The holidays are here. I'm into holiday stuff. And so life is just iterative. It's always changing. I got to go deal with my kids. You know what? I just need some me time. And so I think life is just this kind of rolling, not a tumult, but it's always just, it's busy, right? And so my show has a lot of different people talking about a lot of different things. And I think people are interested in that. And I try to shine a no BS light on things, because it turns out life is a lot more complex than we want it to be. And it's a whole lot less us versus them. And it's a whole lot more us. Yeah, I heard Ice Cube talking the other day on I'm trying to get Ice Cube on my show. And I heard Ice Cube talking, and he's like, man, it's a whole lot less about race. He's like, I got plenty of friends who are black who I don't like. It's not about that. He's like, I got friends who are white who I love. It's like, it's not about that stuff. It's just like, we just got to work on getting along with one another in general, as opposed to worrying about what color we are. And I believe in that. I actually, and I won't say we're friends, but I know the DOC. We were talking about these things. We're basically the same age. And when we talk about these things, we all feel like we're being divided almost on purpose. And it's like, I've got no problem with most people I meet, and the people I talk to, the people that I want to resonate with, they just don't want to be lied to. They just want someone to be honest with them. And if something sucks, say it sucks, and be okay to disagree with people. You don't got to agree on everything, but we do kind of get along better. And that's sort of what I'm about. And that's sort of what my show is about. So sometimes we talk about spy stuff, because I was a spy. Sometimes we talk about sports, music, talking a lot about Ukraine and Russia, because it's real easy to not know enough about that and start talking like you know about it. So those are the things that I'm into right now.
Okay, so let's talk about that then, since you brought it up. Why is you can help me? You can help educate me, because I don't know that much about
I'll
it.
try.
I know
Right.
how to
Yeah.
ask. I know how to ask intelligent questions. So, can you explain to me why America is giving so much money to the Ukraine to fight Russia?
I can tell you some versions of that answer. I don't profess to know the answer, but I can tell you this. So Russia is is a problem in some people's minds, and
Mhm.
to mute them down as a problem, it's pretty inexpensive for us, all things considered, to fund Ukraine's battle against them. It's pretty inexpensive. It's a
Mhm.
lot of human atrocity and cost. It's terrible for the environment, so in some ways, it's pretty horrible. But there's folks that want there to be that fight to kind of rebalance the board in Europe
Mhm.
and Asia. So the folks that like that sort of recipe and medicine, they're willing to spend money on that. Is it the right answer? Man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It seems like we're the folks who are in charge right now have been spoiling for this fight for a long time, and there's a lot of people in America that have a lot of letters behind their names and make a lot of money on having this fight, and so they really set up for it. However, Russia has also picked this fight.
Mhm.
So, we have this thing. So should we be doing this? I think our hand was forced, but we were glad to force the hand. And I worry that we might do the same thing with China. Like China is glad to do business with us. We should just keep doing business with China and everybody benefit through that. But I just I don't know. So should we be spending money in Ukraine? I think our hand is forced now. So it's past that point. And so if we can destabilize Russia in terms of Putin's power, I think that's
Mhm.
probably a good thing. We don't want to destabilize him too much because unstable Russia is dangerous for everybody. But
Mhm.
the amount of money that we're spending is really sort of insignificant. Pete has heard people say, I should say,
Mhm.
but it sure seems kind of crazy when you look around at the amount of money we're spending outside the country as opposed to inside. And
Yeah.
so, I don't
Well,
know. It's
that's
it's
what
tough,
some
man.
that's what some Americans are saying. Is somebody who I don't know a ton about foreign policy, but I'm like, why are we giving money to if Russia is battling Ukraine? What do we have to do with it? So I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah,
What you're saying is so
yeah,
Ukraine's kind of being used as a pawn here in the whole
yeah.
process, not really
I
about
think
Ukraine.
that's a fair statement. I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can't let Russia just go jump into Ukraine and take over it, right? But if we didn't,
Why not?
why doesn't Europe handle it? Another
Yeah.
fair question, right?
Yeah. So is there any possibility it ends up in a Russia versus America? Or is that pretty much where we are now?
Russia's not that big of an economy. They're
Mhm.
25th on the world scale, smaller than California, so it's not even really a fair fight. They can't outproduce us in any way at all. And so
Mhm.
really it's a more fair fight with Ukraine and us back in Ukraine.
Mhm.
So it's a more proper scale to have that because if we jump in over there, it gets dangerous because then it starts to, then China has to enter into it or some other partner, or then it has to leak out, and I don't think anybody wants it to leak out. So we're trying to, even though we're involved,
Mhm.
it's better to keep it sort of at the scale that it's at. Like Belarusia, being a neighbor is sort of being involved a little bit, but if it escalates and we get involved too much, yeah, that becomes, then we start to lose control of the war dragon, and that's dangerous for everybody.
Hmm. You know
Yeah.
what I thought was crazy that you just mentioned Belarus was. I know you follow sports. Did you see
Yeah.
how when it first happened, the invasion, Russia going into the Ukraine, that Russian athletes were being like banned from tournaments, like tennis
Yeah.
tournaments and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell does a Russian athlete just because you're from Russia,
Yeah.
you can't play in the tournament? So what is that going to do? What
Yeah.
does that do
Well,
anything?
yeah, I think there's a lot of bullshit in all of this stuff, right? And this is me being candid. Like there's a family called the Mazepins, and they're Belarusians, aka
Mm,
Russians, to a lot of people, but they're from Belarus, and they owned is part of a Formula One team, and they got kicked. They canceled the Russian Formula One race. They kicked those guys out of Formula One because the dad was an oligarch, right? And
right.
and look, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, right? But no one's being honest about this stuff. And so the more I look into oligarchs, we're talking just people who are successful at business. And if you're successful at business and from a certain country, all of a sudden you're a bad person. Why? Because the person owns a media outlet. Jeff Bezos owns a media outlet. Elon Musk owns a media outlet. I mean, so what's the
Right.
difference here? Elon, look, and I'm not knocking Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk owns a satellite internet company that Ukraine uses to fight the war, and the United States pays Elon Musk for that.
Mm.
If that's not an oligarch, what is, right? And so we use that term, and it all becomes real bullshit. So when you have some Russian ballerina that can't work because she's from Russia, or Russian athletes have to compete under some nondescript flag because they can't compete under the Russian flag, I think that's not sustainable. To take away someone's country because we're mad at Putin. So I don't know. I don't know how you go forward from that. I mean, how at some point there's going to be a Russia. And how do you expect Russia to behave if we're going to treat Russia and all Russians like they're these monsters? At some point, we have to figure out how to back away from that.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting to me when I saw that, and I see the people on social media with the Ukraine flags in their bios, and I'm like, I know these people don't know anything about what the hell is going on. They're just repeating what they've been told. It doesn't make sense to me. Never did.
And Ukraine's full of corruption too. Like they're what amounts to their Supreme Court justice their head justice guy. He just got arrested for corruption with a lot of cash in his pocket. And the belief right now, and look, you have to let the investigation happen, was that he was going to line a bunch of judges' pockets, and the judges were ready to get their pockets lined, but they caught that money midstream. So we're picking one corrupt thing over another corrupt thing, and they're but Ukraine, and I've been looking into this. Well, Ukraine's working on their corruption problems, which is also code for Ukraine is corrupt. So yeah, they're working on their corruption problem. So we're picking corruption. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to know. And when there's corruption and there's a lot of energy money, there's people trying to divide that money up. And so you see the elbows out. And there's a thing called the Atlantic Council. It's a think tank. And you look at the donors for it. And just some of the, and look, this is not conspiracy theory at all. This is on their website. Among the companies that pay for this think tank are Exxon, Burisma, two of the most influential and the two richest people in Ukraine who are considered oligarchs and thugs. Like these guys all pay this think tank, who pick different oligarchs to go after. Like this is no shit. Like they fight about policy. So we put a blue and yellow flag on our media profile, and it's like, all right, well, what are we doing? Like who's really doing what? And it's out there in the open. And again, it's not a conspiracy. It's on their website. Go to the Atlantic Council and look at their donors. They tell you who gives them money. So it's interesting. It's hard to take seriously sometimes too. You're like, I mean, what are we doing here? You're picking oligarchs, but you're funded by oligarchs.
Right. Exactly. What's your military background?
I was a counterintelligence agent. I've got about 1,000 combat missions in overseas places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Egypt, things like that. And so I've seen what happens at the ground level, because I would leave the camp every day and go into town and talk to folks. And so I see what happens when America thinks it's helping, but it turns out it's not. Because that was sort of like my bailiwick. That was what I would do, is go talk to people, real people.
Okay. What was the most interesting place you spent time in?
When I had like my chops all the way built up, like when I really knew how to do it, I was in like the southern central part of Afghanistan, and I was able to really build up a lot of trust with the elders there, because I didn't want anything from them. It didn't everything to give them other than just the chance to learn about them. And I built a lot of trust up with them. And so that place was called Zabul. It's right next door to Kandahar, and it's actually the home of the Taliban. And their number one guy was this guy named Mullah Omar. He's dead now, but he was alive then. He's this one-eyed, Mullah Omar. He's like this mullah guy who was a character out of central casting for a bad guy, And he lived just down the road. We didn't even know it at the time, but yeah, it was a real interesting time where you could look and see what it really was like to be Afghan and try to survive day to day. Forget our presence and everything else. Like, what was it like to be them? And I learned a lot from that experience.
They knew you were American, right?
Completely, yeah, 100% open. I'm always open about that stuff. There's no point in lying about like why I'm there and what I'm doing. I'm open about
Yeah. Okay.
it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you didn't have to like I mean, weren't there bad guys there who didn't want you there?
Oh, for sure. The Taliban knew I was there. They actually called a meeting and wanted me to come down, and they wanted to meet me.
Yeah.
And so they did, and they realized that I didn't pose a threat to them, because I wasn't looking to defeat the Taliban. Um,
Mm,
I was trying to figure out how to win. I don't like, hey, I'm trying to defeat the Taliban. I'm just trying to understand the people so that I can get us out of their way and then figure out how to help them. And if that involves the Taliban, because I knew that the Taliban was going to be there no matter what we did. We couldn't stop them from being there. So I never made that part of our goal. That was probably a stated goal of the US government, but that wasn't anything that we could do. So I never worried about that. How do
mm,
I how do I help the government be legitimate there? And if I can do that, then the government will figure out how to take care of the Taliban, you know?
right. So
Yeah.
what's the status of the Taliban now?
Oh, they're fully in charge. They're wasting money. They're banning women from going to public places. They're not doing governmental things, and so they're pissing off their people. And at some point down the road, I imagine in different regions they'll get tossed out because they
Mm,
they can't govern. And one thing about Afghanistan is it's really hard to move around and stay alive because you go into the wrong valley. Those guys they'll kill you too. And so
mm,
unless they want full scale internal war, which is hyper expensive and really hard to man up. Because it's terrifying. Some of these valleys, man, you realize that if you go into the wrong valley, you will not come out.
mm,
It's like everything's a box canyon at times, and there's no cars. Like there's such a lack of roads there. So you're on a motorcycle that can go 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, and all of a
yeah.
sudden you realize, uh-oh, there's no help coming. And so it has not gone well for the Taliban. It's not gone well for the Afghans either. So it's sort of a no-win situation. We've made a real hellscape by leaving that place. They maybe had a chance if we stayed long term, but
Mm,
it's a real mess now. It's a real mess.
mm,
We for sure made it worse by leaving.
all right.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so many questions I could ask about that. We can go all day, but
yeah,
yes, it's a
yeah.
really interesting thing. Yeah.
Well, so all right, let's not go all day though. Let's wrap it up so I can let you go back and do your thing. What's one thing you want to leave folks with, and what's the main link you want me to post in there so folks know where to go find things for you and go participate in your work?
Sure. The one thing I would leave people with is just this whole concept of work on your game. That everything that we do, there's a game that you're playing, and your job is to first of all understand what game you're in. A lot of times people get it wrong. They are inaccurate. They get an inaccurate read of what game they're actually in. So you got to know what game you're in. Then you work on your game so you can create an opportunity for yourself. Once you create the opportunity, now you have to go out and perform. When you perform, you want to produce results. If you produce results, you get rewards. You get to name your rewards when you produce results consistently. You get to dictate what rewards you want. And once you're producing rewards and getting your rewards, then you wash, rinse, and repeat. Do the process all over again. Continue to work on your game. Stay sharp. Keep performing. Keep producing results. Because over here at Work on Your Game, we call it a performance and results-based business. So as long as you're performing and producing results, you can get whatever it is that you want. You just got to know what game you're playing. And if I had to give people one link, right now we're dealing with some back end issues on all our platforms right now, but I would send people to thirddaybook.com. Third, that's all spelled out. Thirddaybook.com. That's where you can get a free copy of my book called The Third Day. And The Third Day is the decision that separates the pros from the amateurs. That book is all about how you show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it. I will ship you a free copy of that book. All we ask is that you cover the shipping to USA. That's only $9.95. We'll ship it to you physically wherever you are. Again, thirddaybook.com. Book's free. Just cover the shipping, and we'll get that link will be working the way it's supposed to by the end of the day. Right now, it's not. But,
Nice. Yeah, yeah. I swear to God, man, with these links, everything you're just like, is it working? Yeah, I know, I got you. All right, so thirddaybook.com. You guys know what I always say, buddy, read it. Let's do it together. Send me a DM and we'll do it together. All right, man. I appreciate you being on. Let me roll the credits and hang around. I'll say goodbye to you once those are done. And
sure.
thanks, everybody. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you